I wouldn't have seen it if the morning light hadn't hit just right, a sliver of sunlight streaming between the blinds, landing perfectly on that one tiny object beside the sink. A glint so subtle it looked like nothing more than a stray water droplet or a speck of glitter left behind from some forgotten birthday card. I had just stepped out of the shower, my feet still damp, towel slung low around my waist, hair dripping as I moved across the bathroom floor with that slow, half-awake shuffle familiar to any man clinging to the last minutes of peace before the world demands your full attention. And then, I saw it. At first, I almost ignored it. But something, a whisper in the back of my mind, maybe instinct, maybe just curiosity, made me crouch down and pick it up. It was foil, just a tiny circular pop-out from a blister pack, smooth on one side, but unmistakably medical. And I swear to you, the second I turned it over and saw the imprint, my heart stopped. Because I recognized exactly what it was. It was the backing from a birth control pill. Now I know what you're probably thinking, big deal, right? It's just a pill. Maybe it's from before. Maybe it's old. Maybe it's not what I think. But that's the thing. I had a vasectomy. Not 5 months ago. Not a year. 3 full years ago. After our second child, after all the long talks, the plans, the decisions, I went under the knife for peace of mind, for family balance, for her. And since that day, I haven't touched a single condom, haven't once questioned whether we were in this together. That's the kind of man I am. Loyal to a fault, steady, maybe too steady. So the sight of that tiny foil disc, something she never should have needed again, was like stepping on a landmine you never saw coming. One small, metallic reminder that something wasn't adding up. I stood there frozen, my fingers pinching the evidence between them, staring at it like it might explain itself, like it might jump up and say just a misunderstanding, Mark, nothing to worry about. But it didn't. It just lay there, silent and damning, while my stomach twisted into knots I hadn't felt since my father's funeral. In that moment, the bathroom walls seemed to close in, the air thick with something I couldn't name, betrayal, maybe. Or worse, the dawning awareness that the life I'd built, the woman I loved, the marriage I trusted like the rising sun, might have all been a beautifully constructed lie. And I hadn't even had my coffee yet. It's a strange feeling when your brain knows something before your heart's ready to admit it, like when a surgeon tells you calmly that the skin shows a tumor, but your ears refuse to hear the word, and instead, you focus on the buzzing of the fluorescent lights or the way your shoes feel too tight. That's what it felt like standing there in the hallway outside the bathroom, holding that stupid foil disc like it had answers, as if it could tell me why my wife would be taking birth control pills when I was medically incapable of getting her pregnant. I walked back into the bathroom, locked the door quietly, and got down on my knees, not to pray. I gave that up after my brother died, but to search. I emptied every drawer, every cabinet, even the box under the sink where we keep backup toothbrushes and half-used candles. And tucked beneath a box of tampons and a bottle of expired aspirin, I found them, a fresh blister pack of the same brand she used before our son was born, pills dated just last week, already missing 5. Some men might explode right then, rage, yelling, fist through drywall. But I didn't. I'm not built that way. I'm methodical. I'm patient. And more than anything, I believe in understanding before acting. Maybe it's the engineer in me. Never assume the cause before you've traced the circuit. So I stood up, set the pack carefully back where I found it, wiped down the sink, flushed the toilet to sell the illusion, and stepped back out into our sunlit hallway like nothing had happened. I even called out good morning to Lisa as she poured her coffee, her robe half open, her hair still wet from the shower, the same woman I'd made breakfast for 3 days ago, who had laughed at my old man jokes just last night while we watched reruns in bed. But now I saw her differently. Every move she made, every smile she flashed, felt rehearsed. I watched her like a stranger watches a magician, looking not at the trick, but at the hands trying to hide the truth. I needed more than a hunch and a strip of pills. I needed evidence, undeniable and solid, the kind that couldn't be explained away with tears or twisted into gaslight guilt. So that afternoon, while she was out running errands, I drove straight to the electronics store on the other side of town, not the one near our neighborhood, where someone might recognize me, but the one in the industrial district that smells like burnt solder and desperation. I bought 2 small voice recorders, a pair of Wi-Fi-enabled cameras no bigger than a deck of cards, and a GPS tracker barely the size of a car key fob. And on the drive home, gripping the bag in the passenger seat like it was a weapon, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a betrayal I was uncovering. This was a second life, a performance. And I was the fool sitting front row every night, applauding the show while someone else got to see the scenes that played behind the curtain. There's a moment, a precise, crystallized second, when you cross a line you can never uncross, not because you want to, but because something inside you requires it, some primal piece of your spirit that refuses to sit in the dark and be lied to. That moment for me came late on a Thursday night, after the kids had gone to bed and Lisa was curled up on the couch in one of my old college sweatshirts, sipping red wine and watching some mindless Netflix drama about a husband who cheats on his wife. The irony, at the time, so thick I could hardly breathe. I excused myself to take a call from work, ducked into the garage with one of the voice recorders, and slid it under the driver's seat of her car, securing it with Velcro in a spot so hidden that only a mechanic tearing the seat out would even know it was there. It didn't feel wrong. It felt necessary, like drawing a boundary in a house that had begun to shift beneath my feet without warning. The next few days blurred together in a haze of pretending. Pretending I was still the same man. Pretending I wasn't secretly checking the synced audio files on my phone every night like a teenager reading forbidden texts under the covers. Pretending that every moment I spent with Lisa wasn't laced with suspicion. She didn't change much. She was still affectionate. She still kissed me before bed and laughed when I burned the toast. But I noticed the patterns more clearly now. How she always left at the same time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. How she dressed a little too carefully on errand days. How she started putting her phone face down on the table and began sleeping with it under her pillow. The audio files were mostly mundane at first. The rustle of grocery bags, the opening and closing of car doors, the sound of her humming along to the radio. But on the third Thursday, I heard it. A voice. Male. Confident. Playful. I couldn't make out the words at first, but the laugh that followed, her laugh, the one I hadn't heard in months, was unmistakable. It wasn't the way she laughed at my jokes. It was the kind of laugh a woman lets out when she's flirting without consequences, when she's basking in attention that makes her feel 17 again. I played the clip 10 times that night, sitting alone in my office with the door locked, fingers trembling as I adjusted the volume, trying to decipher every syllable, every pause, every breath they shared in that car like it was sacred ground. And it was then, right then, with my heart in my throat and my fists clenched in my lap, that I realized this wasn't about paranoia. This wasn't imagination. This was real. Something was happening, and she was doing everything in her power to keep it hidden, to protect it like a dirty little secret she couldn't resist. And me? I was done waiting. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. No, I was going to watch. I was going to listen. And when the time came, I was going to make sure she never forgot what happens when you betray a man who gave you everything. It was a Tuesday, which felt poetic in the cruelest way. The same day she always claimed to meet her friend Natalie for lunch, a name that now echoed in my ears like a warning bell instead of a harmless errand. That morning, Lisa kissed me on the cheek with the same practiced softness she'd always used, told me she'd be back by 3, and floated out the door wearing a pale blue blouse I hadn't seen before, one that hugged her body in ways I hadn't seen her dress for me in months. I watched from the upstairs window as she backed out of the driveway, her hand dancing across her phone like she was texting someone she couldn't wait to see. She had no idea, of course, that her car was no longer hers alone, that I had ears in her dashboard and eyes beneath the rearview mirror. That day, for the first time, I didn't go to work. I sat in my office at home with the feed open on my laptop, the camera app split between still silence and the promise of answers. It didn't take long. At 12:42 p.m., her car pulled into a restaurant on the edge of town. Not the cafe she'd always mentioned, the one with the framed photos of overcooked pasta and wilted basil leaves, but a sleek little place I didn't even know existed. One of those trendy spots with glass walls and wine racks and valet parking, the kind of place you go when you want to feel seen. I watched the video feed from the car as she turned off the engine, adjusted her lipstick in the mirror, and then my heart dropped. Sent a text with a smile so wide it hurt me to watch. 3 minutes later, a man walked into frame, tall, athletic, just enough stubble to look intentional. He tapped on her window, and she beamed, literally beamed, like a teenager meeting her crush at prom. She stepped out and hugged him in a way that made my stomach knot. 2 arms, full body, her chin tucked into his neck, and when they pulled back, she ran a hand down his chest in a way no friend ever should. I didn't blink as I recorded the screen. Didn't breathe as they walked inside arm in arm, her hand never leaving his. I kept waiting for it to make sense, for some detail to prove me wrong. Maybe he was her cousin, maybe an old friend from college, maybe just a moment of misread body language. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This wasn't new. This was rehearsed. This was routine. And I realized that the worst part wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was how comfortable she looked in the lie. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look guilty. She looked alive. And for the first time in this entire unraveling, I felt something stronger than heartbreak. I felt focus. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was war. Quiet, careful, invisible war, and I wasn't going to lose. There's a very specific kind of silence that fills a room after betrayal has settled in, not the kind that screams, not the kind that begs for confrontation, but the thick, heavy kind that hangs over your shoulders like wet wool and makes even the tick of a clock sound judgmental. That night, I lay in bed beside my wife, the same woman who just 12 hours earlier had pressed herself into another man's chest like she belonged there, and I listened to her breathe. Calm, relaxed, untroubled. It was almost admirable, the way she compartmentalized, how easily she drifted off to sleep while I lay inches from her, staring at the ceiling like it held the answers I couldn't bring myself to ask. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink for what felt like hours. Instead, I ran every detail of that lunch through my head, her laugh, the touch, the way she looked at him like she used to look at me back when we were still building something instead of pretending we still had it. The next morning, I made her coffee just the way she liked it, 2 sugars, no cream, and kissed her forehead as she left for work, the bitterness of the roast almost sweet in comparison to what I was planning. I took the day off and began constructing what I now consider my second life, a life in which I would not be the fool, the doormat, or the blind man who waited too long to act. I transferred our joint savings into a separate account under the guise of tax restructuring, set up encrypted folders with the surveillance footage, and began searching for the best divorce attorney in the state. Someone who didn't flinch at high-conflict cases and who wouldn't blink if things got messy. I even visited the bank and opened a safe deposit box to store a hard drive with everything I had: audio, video, timestamped screenshots. I left nothing to chance. If she wanted a secret life, I would build an empire of truth beneath her feet and wait patiently for the moment to let it explode. And still, I smiled. Not out of joy, not from revenge, not yet, but from clarity. Because clarity is rare. Clarity cuts through emotion like a scalpel, leaving you raw but aware. And in that clarity, I stopped loving the woman beside me. I stopped mourning what we were. I started thinking like a man with nothing left to lose and everything to take back. My body still ached from the betrayal, sure, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. And in that sharpness, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't the one who should be losing sleep. I wasn't the one living a lie. She was. And soon, she would know what it felt like when the person she thought would never leave does so without saying a word and takes everything with him. You'd be amazed what a man can do when he stops pretending to be the man he used to be, when he finally lets go of hope, strips off the blindfold of denial, and allows the facts, cold and sharp, to lead him where they may. That version of me, the man who used to buy roses on Fridays and wait for text replies with a hopeful smile, had died quietly sometime between her lipstick smudging that stranger's collar and her hand trailing down his arm like it was second nature. The man I became didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't beg for explanations, he planned. So when Lisa left for her monthly HR seminar, which, by the way, was now confirmed to be booked under a hotel registered to a name I didn't recognize, I took the opportunity to visit the one place I knew she'd never think to look. The bank where we still shared a safe deposit box from years ago, back when trust was implicit and secrets were for birthday surprises, not affairs. I requested a second box under my name only, this time in a separate branch across town, one with no paper trail tied to our joint accounts. Inside, I placed a portable hard drive wrapped in a Ziploc bag, labeled in black Sharpie, confidential, legal. On it, I had compiled every recording, every screenshot, every GPS ping, every surveillance video, and perhaps most damning of all, an exported file from our joint checking account showing recurring monthly payments to an anonymous Venmo profile labeled simply M. My attorney confirmed what I already suspected. M was Marcus Delgado, a 36-year-old personal trainer with a marriage license to another woman and a pending small claims case for unpaid rent. Not exactly the dreamboat she made him out to be. I printed out the screenshots of his public social media posts, shirtless mirror selfies, videos from a gym that Lisa had never mentioned, and added them to the folder. And the final item? A notarized letter to my lawyer instructing him to deliver the entire contents of the box to Lisa and Marcus's employers if anything unexpected happened to me. Paranoia? Maybe. But chess isn't won by the piece with the biggest heart. It's won by the one who plays the longest game. The beauty of it all was in the calm, the absolute, calculated calm of preparing the truth like a weapon forged in silence. And the irony? Lisa had no idea. That night she came home humming a song from the radio, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I'd watered the hydrangeas, as if we were still living in the version of life she wanted me to believe in. She talked about refinancing the mortgage, asked if I wanted to take a weekend trip next month, maybe Aspen, maybe Tahoe, and all I could do was nod, smile, and file away her every word like evidence. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I was already halfway out the door, and she was dancing on a minefield of her own making. She just hadn't heard the click yet. There's a certain thrill, a razor-thin, ice-cold thrill, that pulses through your veins when you're standing in a room you've rigged to explode and the person standing across from you is smiling like nothing's wrong. It was Friday morning when I told Lisa I'd be heading out of town that evening, a last-minute client retreat 2 states over, mandatory, couldn't get out of it even if I wanted to. She sighed in that performative way she'd perfected over the years and offered her half-hearted sympathy, then reminded me to call before I landed and not to eat junk food this time. I nodded with a smile that didn't reach my eyes, then left her in the kitchen sipping the coffee I'd made, the same way I always did, just enough to keep the illusion alive. But there was no retreat. There was no flight. There was only the trap, the stage I had built, the final test she would fail without even realizing she'd walked into it. And this time, I wasn't going to sit behind a screen. This time, I'd be watching live. I coordinated with my private investigator to install 2 additional cameras that morning, one hidden in the hallway just outside our bedroom door, and another, far more discreet, embedded into the frame of the full-length mirror she'd recently installed in our guest room. He was good, ex-military, silent, efficient, and completely unbothered by the morality of it all. They never see it coming, he muttered as he drilled, because they think no one's watching. I gave him a generous bonus before he left, then parked my car at my coworker's empty lake house 15 minutes away and took an Uber back to a second-story Airbnb directly across the street from our home. I could see our front door, our driveway, our bedroom window. I sat there in the dark with headphones in, the live feed humming on my laptop, my palms sweaty not from fear, but from the electric anticipation that buzzes in your blood when you're on the brink of truth. At 7:04 p.m., the porch light flicked on. At 7:06, Lisa stepped out wearing the same black dress she hadn't worn since our anniversary last year, the one she claimed didn't fit anymore. At 7:11, a silver SUV pulled into our driveway. And at 7:12, she kissed him before they even reached the door. They didn't waste time. None of them do. From the moment she led him inside, their laughter echoed down the hallway, their silhouettes dancing across the walls like shadows in a play. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just recorded. Every whisper, every unzip, every lie laid bare in the space that used to be our marriage. And while they tangled themselves in sheets I had washed the day before, while she said things I didn't think she was capable of saying out loud, I sat in that tiny apartment across the street, silent, calm, surgical, and finalized the email that would send everything I had to both their employers, their spouses, and my attorney. The fuse was lit. The proof was undeniable. And she didn't even know that her performance, her betrayal, her destruction of 18 years had just earned her a front-row seat to her own unraveling. There's something eerily serene about returning to a home you no longer recognize, a place filled with the same furniture, the same framed vacation photos, the same faint scent of lavender she used to spray on the curtains, and yet, none of it feels like it belongs to you anymore. When I walked through the front door the next morning, the sunlight streaming through the windows had a sterile, almost surgical glow to it, like the house itself knew the truth and was waiting for the wound to be stitched or split wide open. Lisa was in the kitchen, barefoot in leggings and one of my old t-shirts, humming along to a song on the radio as she cracked eggs into a pan like it was any other lazy Saturday. I watched her for a moment, not with love, not with hate, but with the kind of detached curiosity you feel when staring at a museum display of a civilization that used to matter. She turned around, surprised to see me back so early, and before she could ask a single question, I set the folder on the counter between us, slid it toward her slowly, and said with a voice so calm it made her blink twice, "You're going to want to sit down." She didn't, not at first. She laughed awkwardly, some confused sound halfway between guilt and disbelief, and opened the folder like it was a prank gift waiting to be revealed. But her hands started to tremble the moment she saw the stills, frame after frame of her and Marcus in our home, in our bed, on our couch, time-stamped, dated, categorized like evidence in a trial where the jury had already reached its verdict. She flipped further, finding the screenshots of her messages, the bank transfers, the hotel booking confirmations sent from her company email. Her smile died. Her posture shifted. And for the first time in months, I saw her mask slip, like a pane of glass hit by a slow, deep crack. "I can explain," she whispered, but I cut her off with the flick of a flash drive across the counter, the recordings, the live video, the bedroom audio. "Explain it to my lawyer," I said. "Or to HR. Or maybe to Marcus's wife. She's getting a copy too." She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, like she was searching for the right emotion and coming up empty. Regret? Anger? Fear? It didn't matter. I had already disconnected from whatever story she thought she could spin. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a therapy session or some emotional breakdown where we cried and forgave and tried to pretend it hadn't happened. This was execution. "You have until tonight to pack," I said. "The house is mine. The divorce papers are in your inbox. And if you even think of trying to lie to the kids about why this is happening, remember, I've got enough here to bury your reputation at work and take full custody. So choose your words carefully." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just turned, walked out of the kitchen, and let the sound of her sobbing follow me up the stairs like a ghost begging not to be forgotten. But I had already buried her in my mind. And there was no resurrection coming. They say silence is deafening, but I've learned that it's not the silence itself, it's what follows it that rattles the bones. The morning after I handed her the folder, Lisa was gone. Not a note, not a goodbye, just the unmistakable emptiness of a person trying to vanish before reality catches up. Her half of the closet had been cleared out hastily, some drawers left open, a curling iron still plugged into the bathroom wall like she'd been interrupted mid-routine and simply walked away. And yet, in her absence, the house felt heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the crash to come, and it didn't take long. By noon, I'd received a call from Marcus's wife. She had gotten the package I sent. Her voice was raw, like she'd been screaming into a pillow for hours, and though she didn't say much beyond a shaky thank you, I could hear the storm already building on her end. Within 48 hours, Marcus's name was scrubbed from the company directory and Lisa's office. Well, that became the epicenter of a scandal they'll be whispering about long after the ink dries on our divorce. What surprised me wasn't how fast everything unraveled, it was how publicly it did. Word spread like wildfire. Coworkers talked. HR investigated. Screenshots leaked. Someone even forwarded me a thread on a private Facebook group where local women were piecing together Lisa's affair like amateur detectives in a suburban crime documentary. She tried to control the narrative, of course, claimed it was emotional hardship, miscommunication, pressure at work. But truth doesn't bend forever. Eventually it breaks. And when it did, she lost more than just a job. She lost her image. Her circle. Her grip on the perfect little life she thought she could burn behind my back and still walk through the front door like nothing had happened. Her boss, the same man she once invited over for barbecues, personally called to inform me that Lisa was no longer with the company and that they were deeply sorry for what I had to endure. I told him not to be. I wasn't sorry. Not anymore. I kept the house. I got full custody of the kids, not because I begged for it, but because even she couldn't deny it was the only sane choice after what she'd done. She moved into a rented apartment on the edge of town, the kind with paper-thin walls and a parking spot labeled guest, which felt like the perfect metaphor for what she'd become in our lives. An outsider. A visitor. Someone who could be tolerated for brief visits but never invited to stay. She tried reaching out a few times, a late-night voicemail here, a weak apology there, but by then, I'd blocked her number. Not out of spite, but because I knew that healing doesn't begin when they say sorry. It begins when you say, enough. And as I stood in my kitchen, drinking black coffee from my favorite chipped mug, watching the morning sun rise over a lawn I now mowed with peace in my chest, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. Freedom. Not just from her, but from the lie I had once called love. They say revenge is best served cold, but I've found it tastes even better when you no longer need it. Months passed. The air in my home shifted from heavy to still, from haunted to healing. The kids adjusted faster than I expected, which told me everything I needed to know. They'd seen more than I realized. They stopped asking when Mom would be back. My son stopped waiting at the window on Sunday mornings. My daughter stopped defending her. There's a strange comfort in knowing the truth has a way of carving out space for peace. And as spring thawed the last bit of frost from the hedges outside our living room window, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. I took up running again. I started cooking dinners that didn't come from a box. I even joined a local photography group, not to impress anyone, but because I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed seeing the world through a different lens, one not filtered by suspicion and betrayal. One afternoon, while sorting through some old boxes in the garage, I came across a dusty envelope with Lisa's handwriting on it. Our honeymoon itinerary, scribbled in faded blue ink. All the places we said we'd visit one day. Paris, Banff, Maui. I held it in my hand, not with sorrow, but with detachment, like a man reading a story he'd once been in but no longer recognized himself in the pages. That night, I booked a flight, not to Paris, not to anywhere romantic, but to Montana. Remote. Quiet. No distractions. I spent 5 days in a cabin surrounded by nothing but trees, snow, and silence. No phone. No laptop. Just my thoughts. And it was there, with whiskey in one hand and my feet propped by the fire, that I opened the last message Lisa had ever sent me. Can we talk? Just 3 words. But the answer, the only answer I would ever give, was already clear. I deleted the message. I blocked her for good. And in that final act, I closed the last door she thought she could slip through. Back home, I stood on my porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise with the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need applause or validation. Lisa, from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, was working part-time at a boutique across town. She'd lost her title, her benefits, her savings. And as for Marcus, he disappeared from the grid completely, deleted socials, filed for divorce, probably starting over somewhere far from here. But I didn't care enough to follow the rest of their story. I had mine, and mine was finally unwritten. No more lies, no more backup plans, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. I didn't get revenge in the way most men fantasize about. I didn't shout. I didn't break things. I didn't beg for apologies. I just walked away with my dignity intact and everything else neatly in my name. She lost her life. I found mine. And if that isn't victory, I don't know what is.